got on my handheld radio and called out 999. Officer needs help, emergency.
Hey gang, have you ever watched an ASP video and thought to yourself, man, what happened when the dust clears? Someone's just been in a defensive shooting, they've had to deploy a firearm to protect themselves and their families. Then what happens? Firearms legal protection is there, so you win the fight after the fight and you're able to carry on with your life. Firearms legal protection is the only one that Active Self-Protection recommends. They're helping to train and educate the self-defense community, and that is why they are invested in bringing these educational and training videos to you. Please thank them for their support and consider them for your needs. Check out their plans at get-asp.com/FLP. Get-asp.com/FLP. All right, folks, welcome back to the Active Self-Protection Podcast. I am your host, Mike Williver, your favorite former Fed. With me today is a man whose incident happened in December of 2019, and 2 days later, John Correa covered that incident on the main ASP channel. So 12/21 of 19. That video got 1.2 million views, which is a lot even for a channel this popular. His name is Hugh Grant. He is a recently retired state trooper from the state of Arizona, my home state, and I want to welcome him to the show. Hugh, how are you, sir?
Oh, Michael, good morning. I'm doing quite well. I have my coffee, and so it means I'm alive and breathing this morning.
Yeah, like me, he was recently retired and evidently was chasing a 8-month-old puppy around the house just prior to this. So he's tired already. It's early morning. He's already worn out. Poor guy.
Yeah, this is definitely looking to be about a 5 or 6 cup day so far.
Quick story. One of my earliest guests on the show was named Craig Johnson, and he is a retired lieutenant from the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. And I had Craig on, and Craig had written a book about his incident, which was called Deputy Down, Shots Fired. And one of the things we talked about was that when Craig wrote the book and put it on Amazon, what he didn't know is there was another Craig Johnson who was a very popular author who authored the Longmire TV show was based on these novels. And people got on and left comments on Amazon about his book and gave him 1 star because his name was Craig Johnson and they bought the wrong book. They were looking for the book by this famous author. Walking the earth with a name like Hugh Grant has got to cause issues for you from time to time. Booking a hotel room and they ask you your name, is that ever a problem?
Oh, no. I'm of Scottish heritage. I'm not a Brit. I've always, my ancestors have kicked the British butts back down south where they belong, down in London, and leave the Highlands alone.
They'll take your lives, but they'll never take your freedom, said Braveheart William
Wallace.
Yeah.
People would mention it, and I said, hey, I work traffic, not vice. So
that's great. All right, moving on. So, Hugh, tell us, are you married? Do you have children, grandkids?
I'm married. I'm Al Bundy. I'm married with children. So I have my wife, Stephanie, and our 3 sons. They're all grown, and so we're empty nesters, and we're living up here up on the White Mountains of Arizona now that I'm retired. And I spent my last year and a half up here on the mountain working before I retired, and it was just wonderful. My wife calls me an idiot for not coming up here sooner. So,
for those of you who don't know, the White Mountains of Arizona are absolutely picturesque, and we probably shouldn't mention it because we don't want more people moving there, but cat's out of the bag now. Hugh, tell the folks at home, where did you grow up? Are you a native Arizonan?
I grew up in San Juan Capistrano, California, home of the San Juan Mission. Back then, it was the town was when I was growing up, anywhere from 6,000 to 17,000 people before I went in the military, and it was a great place to grow up. I mean, just it was very small town atmosphere. Everybody knew everybody. All the parents on the street were the neighborhood parents. So if one tells you to do something, it might as well have come from your mom or dad. And we kept for the most part out of trouble, other than the typical mischief that kids normally get into. Not like today, but back in the day. But it was a great time. It was a great time growing up there.
San Juan Capistrano, for those of you who've never been, is absolutely beautiful. It's almost ridiculous how pretty that place is. And there's a mission there that's very, very popular. And some birds, I think. What kind of bird? Swallows or something?
Swallows come back. They have the Swallows Day Parade every year. It's still the largest non-motorized parade in the United States, and it was always fun. We would when the tourists would come into town, we would be riding by the mission, and they'd be lined up for for blocks, and we would point up to a group of pigeons and yell out "swallow, swallow," and so they'd be all taking pictures of pigeons instead of swallows.
That's great.
That was our mischief that we got into. We were pretty a pretty innocent group of kids that, I think what it was is all the deputy sheriffs in town lived in town, so we couldn't get away with anything without our parents finding out about it, or having to pay for it at football practice or little league practice.
That's great. So you mentioned the military. When and what branch did you serve?
I served the United States Air Force. I was a law enforcement specialist. I served for 4 years. I joined the Air Force to see the world, and Uncle Sam stationed me 500 miles from home at Beale Air Force Base, just about an hour north of Sacramento. I always called it Uncle Sham's Great Waste of Life, because we were surrounded on 3 sides by rice fields, and where you have rice fields, you have mosquitoes, and where you have mosquitoes, you have mosquito bites. It was just miserable. Like the people, but it was just a miserable base to be at.
There's no Purple Hearts for mosquito bites, I take it.
Oh no, I would need a truckload of them. The mosquitoes really love me.
Yeah, I don't know why they seem to take to some people. My wife and I can be outside at backyard of her parents' house where they have a few skeeters, and they go to town on her and leave me alone. So there's no accounting for the bloodlust of a mosquito and who it is they choose. So the Air Force, when you joined the Air Force, did you have an eye on going into law enforcement, or is that something that happened after you joined?
Actually, I was a reserve firefighter in San Clemente, California, and my dream was to be a firefighter. I just wanted to be Johnny and Roy and all that, except I didn't want to go to paramedic school. I just wanted to work on an engine company. And it just got, when I was working at San Clemente, we were getting called out every Friday and Saturday night, getting called out for, car crashes involving drunks. And I also, my best friend's dad, who was a police detective in San Clemente. Mm-hmm. And when we were growing up in San Juan, him and his name's Leonard and his father, Dell, had a cattle ranch in San Juan, a 3,600 acre cattle ranch. And Russ, my best friend, and we would go out every weekend. Well, since Leonard was a police detective in San Clemente, of course I knew him, and I just wanted to do something, and I knew there was something else. So July of '82, the city suffered some budget cutbacks, and I was working in fire prevention, and so they eliminated that position for the time being. So I said, well, I'm back to working as a regular reserve and only getting paid by the calls that I go on. And so I said, you know what, this cop thing, my dad was a police officer. And so I said, this cop thing was, maybe I might try it. So I thought, maybe, and I'm 20 years old. I needed to grow up a little bit more. And so I went to the Air Force and signed up as a law enforcement specialist, did my basic training and my law enforcement school at Lackland Air Force Base and outside of San Antonio.
Right.
And after I got out in '87, I still wasn't too sure about being in law enforcement, because I loved the fire service, and I love law enforcement. I said, well, I need to get a job, and I signed up as got hired as a seasonal firefighter, and I did 2 seasons up in Tehama County, about 30 miles west of Red Bluff, and it just didn't, the fire service just didn't click. So between the 2 fire seasons, I put myself to the academy, the police academy. And back then you couldn't find a cop job to save your life.
I remember.
Yeah. um, you had 3 openings and you had 600 people apply.
Right.
And so um, I went back, I moved back down to Southern California, and moved in with my best friend, Russ, and until I found my own apartment. And I was still a volunteer firefighter down there in Riverside County. And I got hired by Saddleback Community College District Police um, in Mission Viejo. And that was, I thought, well, that's pretty cool. This is my alma mater. And I worked there for 4.5 years. And I took a park ranger position in the city of Moreno Valley for a short time. And that was the most miserable job in my life. It was the worst job. It was they were trying to do something, and they were failing miserably, but they were in denial, and it was just so terrible. And I finally left after 6 months. The night that I left, it was the first good night's sleep I had in 6 months.
Oh wow!
And it was terrible. Became a gaming investigator for an Indian casino, and then lo and behold, I applied for a police officer position in the Gila River Indian Reservation, just south of Phoenix. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think I had a shot at it because I'm not native. And lo and behold, they gave me a phone call, said, well, we're sending you some background paperwork, and you finished number 1 on the test. And I said, wow, number 1, I must have been going up against some really brain dead people if I finished number 1.
Right.
So I spent 10 years with Gila River PD. I was a sergeant, patrol officer, and then I was a sergeant. I was the department's first motor officer, the first drug recognition expert, since that was my parte was impaired driver enforcement, and that's all I've wanted to do. And I always said that when I went into law enforcement, I didn't do that to, help people, or I didn't go in to be touchy-feely, or, I went in to save lives. And since since in this country we kill so many people with impaired drivers, well over 10,000 a year. That was my thing. And I worked at Gila River from 1996 to 2006. Applied for as a state trooper for Arizona DPS, and kind of just fell into it. In late November 2006, it was my birthday, as a matter of fact. I graduated from there Advanced Academy, which is only 9 weeks, since I was already a certified peace officer. Just been spent most of my time in the Phoenix Valley. 15 years. I spent 7 years as a motor with DPS, with the 3 with Gila River as a motor. Best job in the world, other than the 4 months of miserable heat. But I did other specialty assignments during my time: vehicular crimes, investigating fatals, emergency management, background investigations, which I really love background investigations too, and then also executive protection, protecting dignitaries that are coming in from out of state. And that was fun too. But those were long. Those dignitaries, they like to spend time away from home, and once they leave the home, you're there with them.
You started with DPS in 2006?
Yeah.
Okay. And I've known quite a few motor officers. I was a police explorer in a department in Maryland, Montgomery County, Maryland, and 2 of our advisors were motor officers, and they absolutely loved their job. And if they had to rotate out of motors, you'd have to take them kicking and screaming. This is the back in the old days when they rode those massive Harley Davidsons, and just to watch those guys whip those things around at like 3 miles an hour was really, I thought that was really pretty cool. So.
Oh, well, they always said it. You can teach a monkey how to ride in a straight line, and the faster you go, the more the higher the bike stays up. But doing slower, that is what you have to learn, because it's the bare base. That's the foundation. And I just love motors. I did motors for 10 years between two agencies, and it's the best job in the world. And we kind of joke, we poke fun at. I have a lot of friends that are in SWAT, and we poke fun at them, saying, "Yeah, you went to SWAT because you couldn't pass motor school." And so it's the battle. It's kind of like the cops and the firemen going back at each other, but the SWAT guys and the motor guys are just going, and so
Yeah, we love we love our hose draggers, as we call them.
yeah, oh yeah,
The Navy and the Marine Corps go back and forth between them. So that's kind of the way it is with cops and firemen. But it's all in fun. We love our firefighting brethren. Hugh, let's talk for just a moment about the day of this incident. Now, I like to say that nobody should have their career defined by one day or one incident, and yours certainly isn't. You served for a very long time. I had this conversation with Craig Johnson, whose incident was so horrendous and harrowing that it definitely stands out, in the career of a law enforcement officer when there's a critical incident like this. That night, you were patrolling in the Tempe area, and you had a ride along with you who was a lady from Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Is that right?
mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And if you haven't seen the video, folks, maybe pause this and go watch it. It's on the Active Self Protection main channel on the 21st of December, 2019. So you're patrolling. Had it been an eventful night up until that point, or was it kind of quiet?
I was assigned to the department's DUI squad. Our command post was set up in Phoenix, and because it was a joint East and West evening, we have a briefing, and then I was assigned. I'm not a real big fan of taking ride-alongs because there's a lot of responsibility in that. I was kind of assigned to it, and she'd ridden around with us for from time to time, and she only rides along for 3 or 4 hours, and then whoever has her takes her back to the command post, and then we go back out drunk hunting. But that particular night, it was really uneventful. A couple stops looking for impaired drivers, and every year I always would go off into Tempe, and their main drag in town is Mill Avenue, and it's where all the bars are at, and the college type restaurants, and they line the street is lined up with trees, and during the Christmas time, the trees have all these lights in them. It's really pretty, and so it's just a way just to get away from the mayhem of the highway and just cruise through town, and we were doing that, and we had just gotten done with that, and I was actually heading back to the command post to drop her off when everything happened.
This dude steps out into the street and knocks over some kind of construction sign or something like that, as I recall. Is that right?
Yeah, it was just they were doing some road construction right there at on Rural Road, right there at what they call the street called Playa del Norte. They were doing some construction in that intersection, and it was just a street sign that had been taken off and put on the sidewalk because they weren't actively doing any construction, and it was he had knocked it down. He had actually I looked out of the corner of my eye, and he had taken it and put it down in the roadway. So
yeah, he was clearly trying to get your attention. He was clearly trying to instigate something at that point. In my opinion, watching the video, he saw the police car. It's a marked unit, and he just decided to do something to get your attention, which he got at that point.
Oh, he got my attention, and and I was I got on the PA, just pick the sign up, or go to jail. It's just, in Arizona, it's a misdemeanor to obstruct public thoroughfare, and I had no intention of arresting him. I just wanted him just to pick up the sign, just quit being a jerk. And then as he walked by, and he took a turn and was walking. We were facing northbound, and he had turned and was walking down the middle of Scottsdale Road there, and Scottsdale Road and rural road. It's
Mm-hmm.
just where the dividing line is between the two names. I don't know, but I saw that. And there was and Thursday. It was a Thursday night, and around Christmas time. So there's a lot of people in Tempe, and there was a lot of cars, a lot of traffic. So I just well, I'm just gonna. I'm thinking this was probably my first thought was this guy was just some drunk
Right.
ASU student because the Arizona State University is literally a stone's throw away. You could see the stadium from where we were at.
Mm-hmm. For folks that may have watched the video and aren't in law enforcement and thought to themselves, why did he have to press it? Let the guy walk down the middle of the road. There's something called the broken window theory of law enforcement, and I'll sum that up briefly. If you have a neighborhood with an abandoned building, and that abandoned building has sat there for a while, and somebody comes along and breaks one of the windows out with a rock, and you let that broken window sit there broken, so somebody else is going to come by and go, oh, look, someone's left a window broken like that for 2 months now. Evidently, no one cares about this building, so I'm going to break the rest of the windows. And then the next day, someone comes along and they start to tag it up with graffiti. The idea being, if you allow that first thing to slide and just let it go, uh, what will happen over time gradually is that rule of law and the idea that there are rules and laws to be respected will erode and deteriorate. And if you are a state trooper and you are representing the state of Arizona and someone says, you know what, screw you, I'm going to knock a sign down in front of you and I'm going to walk down the middle of the road, you could have driven off. Absolutely, you could have driven off and maybe avoided all this. But guess what? That guy would have gotten into that fight with another officer, another deputy, another trooper at some other point. You can't just let these things go. It's not how that's not how any of this
No,
works. He makes a turn. So if you haven't seen the video, you're picturing this in your mind. You're in an intersection of a 2-lane road and you're facing north. This guy walks in front of you, knocks the sign over, walks in front of your car. It conspicuously ignores your order to pick the sign back up. And then to make sure he doesn't lose your attention, he walks down the middle of the street. So he passes by your driver's window, and walks away from you down the street towards the back of your car. So you flip a U-turn, and you're like, I'm sure you're thinking, okay, this guy's a drunk, like you said. That would have been my first thought too. You're in a district with a bunch of bars, so this guy's probably just some drunk, and he's doing drunk guy stuff. So you turn around, you're ordering him on the PA to stop at this point. Tell me what happened then.
well, uh, and I just told him, get out of the road, get out of the road. And like I said, I'm thinking, well, we're just going to be dealing with a what we call, I kind of laugh about. I got a drunk Sparky. There's Sparky is the mascot of Arizona State University.
Ah,
So I got a drunk Sparky walking down the road. I go, God, just get out of the road. Well, he wasn't going to get out of the road, and so I began sizing him up, thinking what, oh, okay, well, yeah. And he's dancing around with his arms waving around on the side. He knows I'm behind him. I'm on the PA, and just get out of the boat, get out of the boat. And I'm thinking, this guy's just going to be a jerk. So I call the stop out, and I tell my dispatcher, yeah, let Tempe know, because one, we're in the city of Tempe. I have statewide jurisdiction, but we're in Tempe, and in the past, when I've needed assistance, and I was in Tempe or any other city, the assistance is there really quick. And I knew with all the activities going on in town, they probably had additional officers on duty doing special assignments. So I just said, yeah, let Tempe know. And then I got out and I confronted him. And it was and right before I got out of the car, he came up and he kicked the front bumper of my car. And I just went, are you an idiot? And that was my thought. And everything seemed to be the typical pet contact. So I got out of the car, I started sizing them up, and I said, well, at this time we're done. We're done with being, giving, the warnings. The idea of take him in custody, give him a citation, and kicking him loose, that was out the door.
mm-hmm.
So so I said, yeah, we're going to arrest this guy. And with with his previous behavior, and that the fact that we were standing in the middle of the roadway, a very busy roadway, I didn't want to I didn't want to get hit. I didn't want to get this guy hit. Took out my taser and I red dotted him, which is placing the dots, where where they're going to be effective.
I felt for you in that moment when you got out. Like you got out of that vehicle with all the confidence and annoyance of a cop who's been on the job for quite a few years, and it had just about enough of this guy's antics already. Like, okay, we're done here. And you gave him a couple of verbal commands, and like you said, you placed that little laser dot where it needed to be for those probes to make contact. Do you know, in retrospect, did both of those probes or barbs actually connect or not? Because we like to say on the channel when we do the badge cams, the taser 60% of the time it works every time because it's frequently ineffective. So do you know if the barbs actually make contact with him or with his clothing?
From what I understand, the first cartridge I carried a taser with 2 cartridges, and the first cartridge hit. Because on the video you can see he kind of flinched down real quick and came right back up. And the second one, and I still had my sights on him, and I red dot him. He flinched even less. And I think what it was the deployment where they struck, and based upon the clothing that he was wearing, it didn't make the taser effective.
Right.
And I've always said that the taser is not the golden gun. It's not the cure-all. It's just like any other piece of equipment we carry. And I've tased people that have that I hit them and they dropped. Yeah. I've been tased, and I can tell you that's 5 seconds of nothing I ever want to deal with again.
Right. For those of you who don't know, listening, the way the taser works is there's a battery inside the taser. These 2 probes connect with the person, and the person is completing an electrical circuit. You're like the fuse in the middle of an electrical circuit, and so it puts all these volts of electricity through your body. And if it works properly, it's gonna disable your muscular system briefly. You're gonna seize up, and you're gonna lose the ability to control your own muscles temporarily. The idea being that you can then be safely brought into custody. But like Hugh just said, it's not a cure-all. It's not a perfect weapon. Nothing's perfect. Some people don't respond to pepper spray. Some people are on PCP and wouldn't respond to absolutely anything. They wouldn't respond to being maybe even shot. So do we know now in hindsight, was this young man under the influence of any kind of drugs, or was he just having a psychological episode at that moment?
It was all psychological. There was when I found out the information, that what little information they had at the press conference, he didn't have any drugs in his system, and that was found. I found that out a couple months later, after the autopsy and after the toxicology.
Yeah, there's something that a lot regular folks may not realize, that if you are the shooter as a law enforcement officer, there is a very detailed investigation that goes on, whether or not it's a fatality, and you frequently aren't privy to the details of that investigation as it's ongoing, because potentially you could have legal and civil liability, so they can't tell you everything as it's going on. So it could be a very long and drawn out and unpleasant process for the officer afterwards. But let's go back for a second to that night. You had tased him, and it had been less effective than was ideal. So at this point, as I recall, he then started coming towards you. At this point, you're kind of off the right corner of the hood of your patrol vehicle, and he then comes towards you. Is that correct?
Yeah. He once I deployed that second cartridge, that's when he actually charged me. And that's just when the training kicked in, to where somebody's charging you. On the video, you can see I put him off over to the right side, is what we'll call parrying, to let his momentum take him farther than he wants to go. And my thing was to honestly, to take the wind out of his sails, put him there, and hopefully have him uh, uh, hit the push bumper of my patrol car, um, and knock the wind out of him.
Mm-hmm.
And then once that happens, I could um, I would take him down to the ground, handcuff him. That would be it. But we missed the push bumper, and uh, then the fight was on. And a lot of the things that during the fight I don't recall. I don't remember, because and I was told when I was on administrative leave after all this, and meeting with a mental health care professional that we have to go to after all critical incidents and all shootings. And she said, "No, you're never going to remember everything." And it was a little frustrating here at first, because I wanted to remember everything, because I knew how serious this incident was. And,
right.
But it's but we just kept fighting. And I heard that that during that fight that I was headbutted, and then I found that out the next day during the press conference. And I was watching the press conference on my phone, and the director of the Arizona DPS, Frank Milstead, he said, "Yeah, he was headbutted. He was hit in the head with a taser." And I literally looked at my phone and I said, "Frank, what in the hell are you looking at?
Right.
You're not." Yeah. And sure enough, I saw the video and I went, "Oh man, I was headbutted." Because when the fight was on, I dropped the taser.
It looked to me like you tried to do a single leg takedown and sweep his legs a couple of times initially. Right after that, parry to this push bumper didn't quite connect. I could tell. Look, you're trying to do a single leg takedown a couple of times. And for those who don't know, a single leg takedown is just planting. Usually, if you're right-handed, usually your right leg, and then pulling the body across that leg to take their feet out from underneath them and put them on the ground and get yourself in a position of advantage. That didn't seem to work. So you guys fought. I went back and timed it, and roughly that fight went on for 1 minute and 30 seconds between the time he made contact with you and the end of that fight was about 1 minute 30. And if you don't know what it's like to fight for your life for 1 minute and 30 seconds, it is not easy. And you're winded after 30 seconds. A professional fighter after 30 seconds of really grappling is struggling. He was not a young man. How old were you when this happened?
58. I just turned 58 the month before.
And this young man was probably in his early 20s, I'm guessing?
He was 25.
Okay. So, that's just, he has an advantage.
24, 25, somewhere in that area.
So this young man has an advantage physically. That just is what is. And unless Hugh is a professional MMA fighter or something, or can hit the gym 6 days a week, he's going to be at a disadvantage physically with this guy. The taser doesn't work. The parrying into the push bumper doesn't work. The single leg takedowns aren't working. This stuff's just not working. So you end up during the fight moving from the driver's side front corner across to the passenger side, just to the right of the passenger side front fender, and you guys go out of view briefly. During this, your ride along, God bless her, is trying to call for help. And as a retired cop, I can hear her voice calling for help coming out of the PA. And I know that no dispatcher is hearing what she's saying at this moment, and my heart just sunk. Again, to call back to Craig Johnson, my buddy who was in that shootout on the second floor landing, he called for help right away on his lapel mic. And what he didn't realize when he was calling for help is that the round that had gone through his vest, through him, and out the other side, the .308 round, had severed the microphone cable for his radio. So he was calling out into the void. Nobody heard a word he said when he said "Deputy down, shots fired." So you probably can't remember, but could you hear her yelling into the PA? Could you hear it? Were you cognizant of that at that moment, or were you having a little auditory exclusion?
Yeah, I remember hearing her because during the fight, when we were over on the left side of my patrol car, I got on my handheld radio and on the mic and called out 999, officer needs help, emergency. And I didn't hear the repeater key up.
Explain to folks what it means when you don't hear the repeater. I know what that means, but I don't think a lot of folks won't have any idea what that means.
Well, every time you talk on the radio and on the system that we have, you let go of the radio mic button, and you hear a click click, which means the repeaters are shutting down. And and I was focusing so much on him and sizing him up, I forgot to turn my handheld radio on. So when I put my initial call for help out, I just went, yeah, and I didn't hear the repeater. I said, "Man, this is not going good," because I thought, and then I remember looking across, and I just looked at my rifle and said, "Call for help," and then she was calling on the PA, and the console has the radio mic and the PA mic. She just happened to pick up the PA mic.
I was going to ask that
and
question.
Normally when I have a ride-along, I always take that PA mic and stuff it down in the seat. And since I had talked to him, was giving him directions over the PA, the suspect, I picked the mic up, and then just by habit, I put it back in the cradle on the console instead of stuffing it back down.
So for folks listening who don't know, I'll explain a couple concepts to you. A repeater is, imagine you have a cell phone and there's a cell phone tower. The repeater acts kind of like a cell phone tower. So your radio, your little handheld radio you see a police officer with, is not powerful enough in and of itself to reach all the way to a dispatch or to reach all the way to another car. So this repeater is kind of like a booster. So when he didn't hear the repeater, he knew his handheld radio was either not turned on or it hadn't hit the repeater, but either way that nobody was hearing what he was saying. And if you've never been inside a police car, you will see two of these microphones. They look like CB microphones, kind of, for those of you who don't know. And one of them, usually in most setups, one of them is the radio that talks to dispatch and to the other units, and the other one is a public address system, which means there's a big speaker on the front of the car, usually, and that's if you need to give directions or commands. Frequently, you'll see a trooper pull someone over, and he'll be giving them commands to exit the freeway through that PA, so they can hear, the people in the car ahead of them can hear you if you're in a particularly busy stretch or it's a bad area, or they want to pull over somewhere dumb that's going to put you both at risk. That's what that's for. So this ride along, God bless her, she was trying to help, but she had grabbed the PA radio and was calling out for help to no one. It was coming out of the speaker in front of the car, so her calls for help went unheeded. And you can hear you on the tape telling her to call for help. And that, again, my heart just sunk when that was going on. So at this point, he is, you had lost your footing. You were on your back, I believe, and he is on top of you at this point. Tell us about that.
Yeah, when we moved over to we're moving over to the right side of the patrol car. The ride-along had happened. Actually, turned my in-car video, one of the two cameras I had in the front, over to as far as to the right as she could. But I don't know if I was hit or, but I know that I had slipped on the pavement markings on the white lines that are on the highway or the roadway, and that's where I realized I remember my leg sliding out from underneath me as I'm trying to, I'm going through and fighting this guy, and that's when I went down, and the whole time, you're always, that's when your training kicks in. Get up, fight. You got to get up. You got to keep fighting. You got to get up. And every time I tried to get up, I got kicked in the head again. And I know was getting kicked because I can see the tips, the white tips of his Van tennis shoes every time, just milliseconds before I felt the impact. And I'm still trying to get up through that. And I was actually kind of laying in a semi-fetal position on my right side, because I thought the farther away I can get from this guy, the less of an impact and the more the more chance I have to survive this.
I think a lot of folks at home might understand this. The fetal position is actually a protective position. It's when you're in the fetal position. There's a reason a fetus
Mm-hmm.
sits the way it does, and that is because you can use your arms to protect your head. You can protect your groin area, especially for men. That's important, and you can protect your vital organs from being assaulted with this guy. So he's kicking you in the
Yeah.
head. At some point, he got a hold of your expended taser and started hitting you with that as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't tell you exactly where or when he got it. I know the taser was lost in the initial fight um, because I needed both hands, and I wasn't going to. Uh, I knew that drive stunning, which is taking the taser and placing it against the body with the electrodes that are on the front of it. You could actually push a button on the taser and send out 50,000 volts without deploying the cartridges.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that that was not going to be part of our plan, part of my plan that night. I figured I'd just get rid of it and just drop it, and then go hands on with them, because that's where we're at. And you need two hands when you're two hands and 2 feet when you're in a fight like that.
Once he's that close to you and he is that assaultive, he was very assaultive. When I say that, I mean he was really trying to get to work on you, trying to get that taser, get the cartridge off, get the taser placed somewhere on him, and be able to make it effective and get enough pressure on him. That wasn't really an option. I think you did the right thing by getting that out of your hand. So it looked like he's hitting you either with your radio or with your taser. Walk us through the rest of this fight up until its conclusion.
Well, I kept getting blows to the head, and I kept trying to get up. And I wasn't in a position really to block any of the blows. I know that I got kicked a couple times in the body, but that was taking. There was nothing really felt because of my body armor. But he would continually kicking me in the head, and basically the world just started spinning. And I said, it was at that time, I was hearing a lot of things were going on in my head, and our senses really the senses that the good Lord gave us really kicked in. I was hearing voices, and it wasn't. And one of them was a recruit training officer when I was in the academy way back in the dark ages, reciting the officer survival creed. And it starts out with the will to survive. To survive the attack must be the utmost of my mind. And the one that wins through the fight is better off than the one that does not. And it goes on. And we used to recite that every day when the academy. So I was hearing, his name was Woody. So I was hearing Woody's voice. The next one was a voice that I didn't recognize originally, and I didn't realize who it was until 5 months after the shooting. And it was, this guy was telling me, take this guy, keep in the fight. Don't let this MF, take you. Fight, fight, fight. And I realized about 5 months later that was a very dear friend of mine, a hose dragger at that, an Irish hose dragger, a guy named Dave Martin, very, very, very dear friend of mine, and who had dropped dead with a heart attack 3 years before. So I was hearing Dave. So Dave was there.
Take your time.
The third voice that I was hearing was when I drew my weapon. I said, we're done here. Because I was thinking he's going to take me out. He's going to take my gun and he's going to shoot me. And in a way, if you think about it, in the whole scheme of things, we go to the job. That's a risk we take, but it's an unnecessary risk. We don't want it to but it would be the cost of doing business. But then what he would do, and I was thinking this whole time, he's gonna get my gun, he's gonna take my ride along now, he's gonna kill her, and then between that, he still has 16 rounds in that weapon on a Thursday night in crowded Tempe, Arizona. And who else is he going to take out? And then I also thought, he's not going to kill me. He's going to kill her. He's only wound me. And then that's something I would never be able to live with. The guilt would be way too strong. That third voice that I was hearing was a dear friend of mine who's a firearms instructor and a range master for us. And he just recently retired last week. That when I decided to pull my weapon, I was hearing his voice. You have a high grip, you have a good grip, press, prep, reset. And it's just so the training kicked in, all the years of firearms training and quarterly qualifications. And I was hearing, his name was Rich, and I was hearing his voice during that time. The things that I was telling myself was, I have to stay in this fight. He's not going to take me out. He's not going to take Diane out, who was the name of the ride-along. A little back history. A couple of years before, we had a very young trooper, Tyler Edenhofer. He was still actually in field training. He was in his last phase. And Tyler was killed on a pedestrian contact. And he is the 30th name on our memorial wall down at DPS headquarters. And it's funny because Tyler and I have the same birthday. And he was, I was one of his instructors in the academy. And so, when he was killed, all the instructors, we kind of owned it. We kind of felt like we owned the reason why he was killed. And it was something that I wouldn't wish upon anybody, because, you think, what could I have taught this kid?
Sure.
That could have saved his life. And there was nothing we could have told him for that particular situation, and the dynamics of his. But his contact was much like mine, and I kept thinking to myself, I'm not going to be number 31. I refuse to be number 31. I am not having my name on the wall. I'm not going to do this to my family. I'm not going to let him do this to my family or my friends,
right?
Or my coworkers, especially during Christmas season. So they, and what I saw, it was kind of weird. It was kind of a split screen, like you would see in like a football game. On TV, you have the game is playing up here, but you have something going on down here, like the scores.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw a portrait of my family that had been taken during a cruise that we had taken some years ago, and then a film strip of everybody that I worked with in my career. And it was just a fast-moving film strip, every single person. And it was just very, very weird. But everybody kept me in the fight, because I'm not going to do this to them. And then when I just made the decision to use deadly force, I pulled my weapon out. I was still in a semi-fetal position over on my right side. And I couldn't engage him. I couldn't point my weapon at him, because he was standing between me and my ride-along.
Oh, okay.
And And I said, no, I have a bad back, what we call backdrop.
Mm-hmm.
I have a bad backdrop. Yeah, I can't shoot. And it was at that time that I started pulling the weapon back just a little bit to see if I can get a better shot. And it was then he grabbed the top of my weapon.
All right, folks, we are back with the Gutowski Files with Steve Gutowski from the Reload.com. He's a good friend of the channel. He's also the host of the weekly Reload podcast, available where all fine podcasts are available. Steven, how are you?
I'm doing well. Uh, been busy lately. A lot of gun news out there. Um, as I'm sure you know from subscribing to our free weekly newsletter that goes out every Friday. In case one plug at the beginning there wasn't enough,
Sure.
we get another one for our free weekly newsletter, so people can check out the Reload and see what it's like before perhaps they decide to buy a membership.
Absolutely. I highly recommend it, folks. TheReload.com. So this week we're going to discuss an article by some guy named Stefan Gutowski. Anyway,
Yeah.
he writes in TheReload.com, the headline is "A Poll Support for Stricter Gun Control Creators." And I think it's an accurate headline for sure. Initially talking about a Gallup poll where it shows pretty definitively, and other polls, it shows pretty definitively that support for stricter gun control is waning for sure. But
Yeah.
it's a lot more complicated than that, and that's how we bring on the smart guy like Steve Gutowski to tell us about it. So, what does this mean to the average American, Stephen?
Yeah, so Gallup found that support for stricter gun laws was down 15 points this year from its peak in 2018.
That's significant.
And that's a big move, certainly, and it's actually at its lowest level since 2014. Now, it's still at 52%, so technically you still have a majority of Americans who say they prefer having stricter gun laws to keeping laws the way they are now or making them less strict. So that's important to keep in mind, but it does indicate the direction that this issue has moved in clearly, and that direction is away from support for new gun control measures. And you've actually also seen it driven specifically by independents. So, you have movement among Democrats and Republicans that kind of mirrors the partisan breakdown. As of late, in 2018, Republicans controlled most things in the federal government, the presidency, obviously. And then by 2021, Democrats are in control of everything. So you kind of naturally see fluctuation there in gun polls a lot of times, where when Republicans control things, people are more open to gun control, and when Democrats control them, they're less open to it. But you also see this movement mainly among independents who are themselves 15 points less supportive of stricter gun laws over the last year. So that's a pretty significant shift that goes beyond that sort of simple partisan explanation. And then, this is also part of a larger trend, as you alluded to there. You've seen this in a number of polls. It's not just the latest Gallup poll. You also saw this in Pew Research. A poll that they put out recently showed basically the exact same trend. Significant drop in support. They did their poll back in September. You also have seen President Biden's approval ratings drop significantly on specifically his handling of gun issues,
right?
Which again, because he's a supporter of stricter gun laws, that indicates that people are, of course, less interested in passing stricter gun laws. And then you also had Morning Consult poll just recently as well, which we wrote up at the Reload, that showed Americans now trust Republicans more on the issue of guns than Democrats, which obviously, again, these are all sort of indicative of the same trend. If Republicans are less likely to institute new gun control measures than Democrats, so if Americans favor them over Democrats on guns now, that indicates that Americans are less interested in passing new gun legislation at this point in time. And so that's really where the trend has moved over the last year or two here.
Yeah, folks listening, if you've seen any of the last few elections, you understand that very few issues swing this much in the polling as this has recently. 15 points that's enormous for any poll to move that much in a short amount of time. When you get elections that are being decided by points, points of points, by 1%, 2%, a 15% swing is huge. And I'd like to think it's because of my show, quite frankly. I think, no, I'm kidding. I think that it's important to keep perspective on this sort of thing. This doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. And like Steven said earlier, these things tend to move back and forth on a pendulum depending on who's in charge of stuff. And
on mass shootings as well
absolutely.
Tend to have a big impact on these numbers, because most of the upswings in support for new gun control measures come in the immediate aftermath of a major mass shooting. So we haven't had one like that in quite a while now. So you see the poll numbers receding back down again as far as support for gun control goes. I also should point out too, in line with the idea that maybe people shouldn't just assume that if you're a gun rights supporter that everything is solved now and everyone agrees with you,
right.
And there's no challenges left for you, right? Because if you look at the polling on individual policies, gun control policies, they poll much better than the general concept of stricter gun laws in a lot of cases. So you've seen things like, of course, universal background checks, right? Background checks requirements on private sales of firearms between, on the used market between private individuals. That still has very high approval ratings. And then even things like an assault weapons ban, bans on AR-15s or magazine restrictions, magazine capacity restrictions, they still poll above 60% approval, even though they too have seen a decrease in support. So there's two things going on here, right? You have support for new gun laws, stricter gun laws, still over majorities, and support for specific policies still over 60%, but they're moving downward in both cases. And that's significant. That's kind of more newsworthy, right? From a journalism perspective than just that they remain high, but it's something to keep in mind as people move forward with their approach to activism on the issue.
Absolutely, folks. This sort of thing is in part a result of the work people like Steven are doing over at Reloadcom, giving people good, sane, sober, down the middle, unbiased, as much as you can possibly be, reporting on the Second Amendment and on guns in America. We have said before in this space, and I'll say it again, it bears repeating, please go and sign up for any kind of membership with Reloadcom. It's a phenomenal resource. He's telling stories and breaking stories that no one else is either interested in talking about or is getting. The guy's connected, he knows people, and he's getting us the information we wouldn't get anywhere else. So go over to Reload.com, get a subscription, give this man a couple of bucks. He's got bills to pay and kids to feed. Steven, thanks so much for being here, buddy.
Thanks. And to give people just a sweet note to end on too,
sure.
Despite what I previously said here, there is one area where the movement has been not cyclical and not temporary, but pretty much permanent, and that's in banning handguns. Almost no one supports banning handguns at this point in time in America. It's down at the lowest point it's ever been in this poll to 19%, and that's a drop of 41 points since 1961. Used to be, like the others, at 60% support. So that's one area where Americans seem to completely agree on the issue.
At some point, we'll have this talk, and I'm sure you probably agree with me, but I posted on social media a while back, if you play out the idea of banning, let's say, AR-15s, imagine you banned Honda Civics tomorrow, and you had to go out and collect all the Honda Civics and pull them from people's cold dead hands. If you were to ban all AR-15s or all Glocks or all whatever, you play that out in your head, and it doesn't end well. There's more guns than people in this country, and the idea that the government is going to retroactively make something illegal, a firearm like that illegal, and everyone's going to turn them in is absolutely, that's a fairy tale. We'll save that for another time. Steven, again, thanks so much for being on, and I'll hope to see you next week.
Thanks for having me.